Good morning. Thank you. Welcome to the 2018 Alan M. Boyden Memorial Lectureship. My name is Nick Hockler, and I serve in the role as Regional Director for the Providence Center for Healthcare Ethics. For those of you who don't know Dr. Boyden, he was a well-respected and world-renowned leader in local and national arenas who was a surgeon at Providence St. Vincent Medical Center for 48 years. One of his greatest attributes as a physician and a surgeon was his ability to find wholeness in the doctor-patient relationship. This lectureship promotes excellence in patient care by connecting medicine with the humanities. It is made possible by the generous contributions of our supporters through the Providence St. Vincent Medical Foundation. I would like to extend a special welcome to Bradley and Alan Boyden, sons of Dr. Boyden, as well as Dr. Alberti and Barbara, who have been wonderful supporters of this lectureship. Dr. Belinda Fu is a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Washington, faculty in the Swedish Family Medicine Residency Program, First Hill in Seattle, and founder and director of the Mayutica Institute, an education and research organization. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree at Stanford, her medical degree from the University of California, San Francisco, and completed her residency and faculty development fellowship at the University of Washington. Dr. Fu is a professional actor and a theater sports ensemble member and improv instructor at Seattle's Unexpected Productions. She is a pioneer in the field of medical improv and co-organized the first annual International Medical Improv Train the Trainer workshop and is the creator of improvdoc.org, an educational resource about improvisation in medicine. She is passionate about improving people's lives through insight and empowerment, and has had the opportunity to share her work at over 50 conferences and seminars. Dr. Fu's creative perspective stems from her unique combination of clinical, teaching, and artistic expertise. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Fu.
Dark in here. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. I may ask to have the house lights up a little bit as we go along. But good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you so much for the introduction and to the entire Center for Healthcare Ethics staff for all your hospitality. Thank you also to the Boyden family and friends for sponsoring this opportunity. I'm very grateful to be here. That was a very generous introduction you gave. My mom would be proud. It's her birthday today. Happy birthday, Mom. This is the slide for Mom. But it's an unlikely story as well. Why is there a physician at Grand Rounds talking to us about improv? So let me give you a little bit of background that you won't find in your standard bio. I was a drama kid way back in high school, but I put that on the shelf. I got busy during my training, lots of school, right? And by the time I got through undergrad, medical school, residency, I no longer had hobbies. and so when I finished residency, I kind of popped my head out of the ground like a groundhog, looking, hello, is the world still there? And decided it might be nice to try something new. Now, I had been dating a person at the time who liked to watch reruns on television, and one day I was like, well, stop flipping channels. What was that show? Go back to that. It was an episode of Whose Line Is It Anyway? A TV improv game show. Have any of you seen that before? Yeah, a lot of you have. Yeah, it's fantastic. Lots of reruns available. Ryan Stiles, Wayne Brady in particular, really grabbed my attention. How do they do that? How do they make up these incredible scenes and stories and songs out of nothing that are so engaging and so hilarious? That looks like fun. I don't know what improv is, but I'll try that. So on a total whim, I signed up for a class. Walked in the door, not knowing anything, having never seen, I didn't even know improv theater was a live thing. I just walked in the door, and it changed my life. It made me a better doctor, it made me a better teacher, and it made me a better person. All those things that I learned through doing improv it steamrolled. It was incredible. I loved that class. I took as many classes as I could. I started auditioning, doing shows, performing, becoming an ensemble member. I felt that it was changing and shaping every aspect of my life. It had felt as though a gift had dropped into my lap that I wasn't expecting. And it had made such a positive difference for me that I became compelled, driven, if you will, to share that gift with others. So that's why I'm here today, to pass that gift along to you. So what I would like for us to end today's session with are these objectives. I would like for us all, by the end of our time together, to be able to define medical improv and its relevance to medical practice and education. I'd like us all to be able to understand the core skills of medical improv, and also to be able to explain the relevance of improvisation to wellness and resilience. Now, in order to get to this end goal, we have to start at the top. And one of the most shocking things that I learned when I walked into that room that day was that improvisation is not random. Now, we use that term colloquially and casually all the time. Oh, the dishwasher broke, so I improvised a way to get the door to close. Or MacGyver, if you are of an age that used to watch MacGyver. Or there's a reboot I heard that didn't last long, that MacGyver would improvise his way through very dire situations using a matchstick and duct tape, or strange things that he happened to have on hand. And people say, oh, I improvise with my kids at the dinner table and make things up. Yes, all of that is improvisation in a casual sense. But what I learned is that improvisation is actually a discipline. In the context of improv theater, improvisation is an art. It is a craft. It is a cultivated intuition that guides spontaneous action. Cultivated intuition that guides spontaneous action. So it isn't a spontaneity of like, oh, I don't know what to do, I'll just do anything, that kind of randomness. It is something for which you have prepared so that you can act with skill in the moment. Wow. And to really understand that, let's think of some analogies. And so one analogy might be that of sports, of athletics, say team sports, such as basketball or soccer, English fan, or the Olympics are happening right now. So say think something like hockey. So in any of these matches, these meets, there are other people involved. And as you know, in your own life, people are unpredictable. So you never know what's going to happen in any of these events. You don't know what the other team is going to do. You really don't know what your teammates are going to do. Sometimes you don't even really know what you're going to do. Oh, whoops, I tripped. So it would be mathematically and logistically impossible to prepare for every single possible scenario or situation that could occur. So does that mean they just give up and say, well, we'll just make it up when we get there? No, they prepare. And these athletes prepare by breaking down these scenarios into their components. So we don't know what the other team's going to do, but we can prepare these sets of plays so that we have options that we can decide at that moment. We can break those plays down into different skills, and you can learn them by drilling. So let's say we're going to practice our passing or our shooting. And we can break those down even more into different components such as footwork or strength. And we're going to go to the weight room so we can even practice our different muscle groups to build up strength. So we can do these different skills, so we can combine them into these plays such that we have an armament of tools that we can deploy at any given moment based on the scenario we encounter in that event. And that is what improvisational theater is doing as well. Not far different from improvisational music, in which you don't know what the other musicians are going to do. It's not a scripted out song, but you know what the elements are, you know what the chords are, the different melodies, you can combine them right at the spot. Improvisational theater is equally that much of a craft. But let me tell you what it is not. Common misconceptions are that improv is the same as sketch comedy. So here we go. Saturday Night Live has these wonderful little skits or sketches. This is the cowbell sketch, again from a few generations past. These are scripted out ahead of time. They may have been developed using improv, but when you see them, there is a script that's been written. So improv is not that. Improv is also not stand-up comedy. One person with a microphone, a stool, and a bottle of water telling you a set of jokes that they have rehearsed down to the phrasing over and over again. If you've ever sat in on bad stand-up comedy, you know that they have practiced. Like that? No, please change that. And that is scripted, and improv theater is not scripted. Improv theater is simply unscripted theater. It's not even synonymous with comedy. And if you've ever either been in or seen a bad improv show, you would know that to be true. But that's on accident. Improv theater is not the same thing as comedy. It is often funny because if you successfully execute the principles of improv with spontaneity and sincerity and honesty, it very often turns out with humor. But it is not intended to be funny. It could be anything. It could be something like Whose Line Is It Anyway, which is a game show. It could be improvised Shakespeare, an improvised opera, an improvised Tennessee Williams, often not funny. There was a movie last year called Don't Think Twice. It's a very good movie. That was about an improv group that kind of captured the essence of it. Second City Theater in Chicago is a mix of sketch comedy and improv. Know that next time you go to see them. Sometimes I do improv too. I was even last summer getting killed in an improvised Shakespeare scene. It may have been funny. So improv is unscripted theater, but we are borrowing from improv theater into medicine from a legacy that goes beyond simply performance. It turns out that improv theater actually began as a form of education. In the 1920s in Chicago, at what is called the Hull House, a woman named Neva Boyd and later her colleague, Viola Spolin, pioneered the use of play as a teaching methodology. It was originally with children, and the philosophy was this. Instead of telling children what to do, we all know how successful that is, instead of just telling them what to do over and over again, we will devise an experiential learning system such that we will play these games, where success in the game is actually the desired behavior. Very clever and very effective. So this game-based, exercise-based, play-based learning quickly evolved into being used for more than just children, but also adults. And the people doing it said not only is it successful in modifying our behaviors in a positive way, it's actually also very entertaining. And that's how it spun off into improv theater as a performance art. Now, as a performance art, it has exploded and expanded all over the world. I've gotten to meet improvisers in other countries, Shanghai, Beijing, Russia, all over the world, people are doing improv theater. It was only a matter of time until adults doing improv theater began to realize that these exercises were making positive impacts on their behaviors off stage as well. And a field grew that is called the applied improvisation. Applied improvisation is taking the principles of improv theater into non-performance contexts, and this has a wide range. Even here at Portland State University, Dr. Barbara Tint is an expert in using improvisation applied to the area of conflict resolution, so right here in your own backyard. There are particularly improv interests, definitely in education, where the legacy from Viola Spolin has continued up and is still used in classrooms around the country, as well as in the world of business, where it has been widely embraced in corporate culture and training as a way of building teamwork and creativity. Improv classes are now taught in many business schools, such as Stanford, MIT. University of Chicago has a faculty member whose sole job is to teach improvisation to the business students. So it was only a matter of time before medicine, entrenched as we are, was like, what are they doing over there? That seems very interesting. Maybe I should try that too. And what we've seen over about the last 10 years is improvisation showing up in the medical literature. In 2011, Professor Katie Watson, a bioethicist at Northwestern University, published an article in Academic Medicine called Serious Play, in which she described a 10-hour improvisation course, an elective, taught to first and second year medical students over about a 10-year period, and describing the positive effects that the students have reported in their clinical practice. In 2012, I cold called Professor Watson, and in 2013, we organized together the first, as Nick described, medical improv train-the-trainer workshop, where Professor Watson was able to bring people from around the world together, about 14 people that first year, and teach what she had been teaching as well. Now, we have continued to do this workshop. It's going into its fifth year. We skipped a year, but fifth year this June. In 16, maybe 15, I'm losing track of time, we published this article in the Annals of Internal Medicine defining medical improv because the field was beginning to grow and we knew that it needed more clarity. And the definition we came up with was actually quite simple, that medical improv is simply the adaptation of improv theater to medicine to improve communication, cognition, and well-being. As simple as that. Adapting the discipline of improv theater, the cultivation of skills through one methodology into a different environment and context. Now, that may still seem unlikely, but it turns out there's a lot of parallels. The goal of improv theater, as I said before, is not comedy, it's collaborative storytelling. And the goal, I believe, of medical improv is collaborative patient care. So in both, the goal is collaboration. The application of it is all that's different. And so that's what brings us here today. So medical improv as a curriculum, it can be broken down into three basic components. I have spent a ridiculous amount of time distilling it into these three components. So first there's the skills. They're the behavioral skills that you learn. This is your equivalent of passing and shooting and setting or playing volleyball. The skills, the behavioral skills. So that's the first component. The second component are the exercises, sometimes called games. We'd like to refer to them as exercises. These are the drills by which you learn the skills. And finally, there are the principles, equally as important. These are the values. This is the meaning, this is the context, this is why you learn these skills. And the best way to understand that is to imagine. This is an experiential learning pedagogy. And I can stand here and talk to you about it, but that kind of doesn't make sense for me to didactically tell you about an experiential learning process. So what we're going to do is we are going to imagine that we are here together in this room and that it is the ideal medical improv learning environment. This is not a lecture hall right now. We are in a smaller room. We're here for a workshop. There's about 10 to 14 of us in the room right now. We're going to be doing this class for a couple hours. Not today, don't worry, we'll end at 9. But we're going to be doing this class for a couple hours, and we're going to meet, about once a week or every other week for about 8 weeks. Right? That's our time together. And we are going to agree that in our time together, we are going to all follow a set of values, a set of ground rules, if you will. Right? And this is an example of what some of those ground rules might be. Our first ground rule is this. At no point in time in our sessions together in this room do any of us have to be smart. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be creative. You don't have to be funny. You don't have to be original or impressive or anything outstanding at all. Just come as you are. When I first started this out, I would adopt a phrase from one of my improv instructors. He would like to say, just be average, aim for C. So I would try that with my medical students, but they got very hung up on this, and they said, B? Can I aim for B? Or is that a D? I don't know, but you said C, and I was like, okay, scrap that. Just don't try. I mean, try, but just don't try that hard. Don't overthink that. Simply come as you are. Free yourself from that expectation. We can do that because principle number 2, you know everything. As far as we're concerned, in our time together in this room, doing these exercises, you have everything you need. You know everything you need to know. If I say, hey, for this next exercise, please play the role of a plumber, and you're like, I'm sorry, I can't. I've never plumbed a thing in my life. I don't, pipes, very confusing. It doesn't matter. Make it up. This sink is not real. It doesn't matter because it's not about the content. It's about the behavioral skills underlying it. So free yourself from having to be right or wrong. You know everything you need to know. And because of that, there are no mistakes. In our room here, there are no mistakes, only gifts and opportunities. Now, this is a reframing. Of course there'll be mistakes. I will say, everybody turn to face the right, and someone will turn to face the left, inevitably, always, and that's fine. Because this is an opportunity for us to say, okay, well, maybe I need to clarify my directions. Or it's an opportunity for that person to be like, oh, I wasn't paying any attention. Or it could be an opportunity to be like, I need to study the difference between right and left. Whatever it is not a cause for shame. There is no room for shame in our room together. So there's no mistakes. There's only opportunities to learn and gifts to ourselves and to one another. And that is because we are supporting each other and we're making each other look good. We don't have to worry about making mistakes because we know that if we do make an error, everyone around us will be there to make us look good. So if I walk on stage to start a scene and I completely blank out, have no idea what I'm going to say, I'm staring out at the back wall thinking, oh God, I don't know what to say. Nick, he has my back. He comes up to me, taps me on the shoulder, and he says, the Grand Canyon really is spectacular. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you very much. I had no idea what I was going to say, but he made me look good. And in a way, my state of blank was a gift to him because it looked like I was looking at something. And he's like, oh, that's a gift. I'm going to turn that into she's looking at a view. So there's no mistakes. There's no reason to feel ashamed. These are the rules of the room. We're here to take care of each other. We don't have to worry about ourselves. You know everything. There's no mistakes. Don't try too hard. Typical medical school culture, wouldn't you say? Right? So that's why this is our safe space. This is our safe training environment. Now, one of the next few things that I learned in improv class that totally blew my mind was this concept, was that we will celebrate and embrace failure. I mean, come on, Belinda, really? I mean, you said there's no mistakes. I can kind of deal with that, but embrace failure, you're going too far. Actually, it was great. I'm from California. That's where that came from. Sorry. I did put the Valley Girl back in the closet. One of the first things we learned, I was taught this by Matt Smith, one of my improv instructors in Seattle. It was something called the failure bow. Every time we made an error in class, instead of doing our usual error response, which is like, it was him, or something like that. Nope, not me, didn't happen. Oh, I can't believe I did that. Instead of that, we were to take a bow. And we would take a great big bow, and everyone would clap for us. Outrageous. Every single time. Every single time. And we had to do it like this, really, really big, with a really big grin on our face, and take a huge bow, like you're falling, and everyone would clap for you. And the reason we would do it is this. He said, imagine a circus performer or anyone taking a big risk. Oh, ice skater, right? Who's watching that right now? If one of these high-risk performers takes a fall, they'll tumble, they'll hit the ice, they'll hit the net. And what do? They don't stomp their feet, get really angry, and storm off. Because how would we feel if that happened, watching that? Very awkward. And also, are they okay? Right? That's not what they do. They are professionals. What they do is after they fall or make an error, they keep going. And in fact, sometimes they'll take a bow. And what is our instinct as an audience? We applaud. Yes, exactly, right? Even just thinking about it, like, yes, you're okay. Thank you. In taking a bow, they are not only taking care of themselves, they are also taking care of us. I am okay, I tell myself, and I am okay, I am telling you, and we can all move on. And to linger on it otherwise is simply to pull energy away from everyone else. And so we had to do this over and over again, take this bow. And so since we are here together in this room, I'm going to ask that we do a failure bow together, if you will, because this is, after all, experiential learning. So I'm going to ask you, taking care with your coffee cups and any other items that you might have, I'm going to ask you all please to stand up for us to do this exercise together. It's very, very simple. And if you are not able to stand up, that is fine too. And so this is all we are going to do. Before we do the failure bow, it helps a little bit just to get in your head, just try to think of a mistake you may have made recently. It doesn't have to, and you don't have to tell anybody, it's just in your head. A big one, a little one. If I forget to call my mom today, that will be a big one. But it could be I forgot to close a garage door, which almost happened last week, or anything, big, small, up to you. Just get it in your head, because we're going to purge it. And now please take the stance of a failure bow, which is arms really, really high, big, big, big high, and not this, because that's different. And also big smile on your face, because this is also really unconvincing. And so big, big grin on your face. And now taking care not to bonk anyone on the head. On the count of 3, we're all going to yell, I messed up, or screwed up, or whatever verb you want. No one can hear you. You're yelling. I messed up. You'll take a bow, and as soon as you take a bow, start clapping for yourself and everyone else around you. Does that make sense? Okay? Yeah. Okay, no bonking. All right, so on the count of 3, I messed up. 1, 2, 3. I messed up. Take a bow and start clapping. Thank you. Thank each other. Thank you very much. Very good. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Please have a seat. There you go, your very first failure bow. As we go through our time together, every time an error occurs, we'll take another bow. All right? So that's how we begin. These are the rules of the room. These are the principles. Let's get to the skills. The skills of improv are manifold, countless, if you will. Too many. And so it's almost overwhelming. So they're very much the skills of life, because in improv, it's all about communicating with other people. And as a human, most of our life is about communicating with other people, including yourself, if you want to think of it that way. Because I felt this to be rather overwhelming, I boiled these down into 3 clusters of skills. And the first cluster that we'll consider is a cluster of skills of awareness. Awareness. Anything that has to do with perception, observation, listening. You contextualize this. You could think of a patient-clinician encounter and think of everything you have to observe in that moment about the environment. Is it cold? Is it hot? Is the door still open? Can I hear people clapping in the other room? Can I hear what they're saying in the other room? Are the blinds closed? The environment. Also about what's happening with the other person. Are they looking at the floor? Are they disheveled? They're not making eye contact. They're smiling a lot. Why is everything they're wearing purple? Right? Are they happy? Are they sad? These are observations about the other person. So the environment, the other person, and yourself. Am I happy? Am I sad? Is that me that smells? My shirt's a little, oops, why do I keep looking at the door? Being attentive to what's going on with yourself as well. We need all these observational skills. And in order to really give an example of how we might learn these observational skills, I have kindly accepted the generous offer. Thank you, Nick and Kevin, for volunteering, because I asked them to help me demonstrate. So please give them a hand, because they're going to come up and help me demonstrate this. Thank you. And we're going to come over here just so we're out of the screen. You're laughing. These guys are being brave, so thank you. They have no idea what they're about to do, which I really appreciate that. So
we bow first.
Yay! Let's bow. Bow as many times as you can. Yay! What we're going to do is an exercise that I call emotion mirror. I learned this from Dan Sipp, who is he's the director of standardized patient education and training at Duke University, and a very talented improviser as well. And so the way it's going to work is this. Imagine we are in our classroom, and behind Nick is the rest of you. There's a line of people here, and behind Kevin is a line of the other half, right? And so we're all in this exercise together. These guys are just going first. And what's going to happen is that, starting with this side, Nick, you're going to think of an emotion. And just keep in your head, like, it could be happy, sad, anxious, optimistic, any emotion. And you're going to whisper it in my ear in a second. But what you're going to do is you're going to step forward and greet Kevin. And you're going to have a very simple conversation. And you're going to simply say, hello, Kevin, with that emotion. And not in a cartoon way. Like, if you say you're sad, it's not like, hi, Kevin. So not like cartoon emotion, but in a recognizable human emotion. And what you're going to do is physically mirror whatever it is you see he's doing, whatever it is, and then simply say, hello, Nick, you seem, and then try to guess what that emotion is. And it doesn't matter if you're right. No mistakes. Got it. Easy as that, right? And then if you get it, and then we'll go from there. Simple as that. Questions? Cool. Tell me what that emotion is. Okay. Great. All right. Did you hear that? Okay. Oh, darn. Okay, that was.
I can come up with another one.
Let's try that one without the mic. Okay, great, thank you. Yay! Thank you. All right, perfect. So please. All right.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Nick.
You seem, I'm trying to name.
You seem exuberant.
Close. Let's give him a hand. Yay! Okay. Exuberant was not the chosen emotion, and it doesn't matter. So, knowing that exuberant was not the chosen emotion, we're going to do that again. What did you observe him doing?
I think I saw a little change in his posture when he had come up to me, and
Okay.
it made me think that he was trying to evoke a different sense of excitement, joy.
Something. Yeah. Okay. And I noticed that your eyes brightened up too. Did you know that you were doing that when you saw him?
I noticed something in his eyes.
Something, yeah. So something there changed. You guys might have been able to see that too. So stick with this same emotion. I didn't just say it out loud, did I? No. But try a different strategy, whatever that means to you. Same emotion, different strategy.
Okay.
Well, just play with it. Yeah. Okay. Same thing.
Hi, Kevin. Great to see you.
Hi, Nick. Great to see you.
You seem.
You seem, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
You seem excited.
Close. Let's give him a hand. Yay. Great.
It's hard to both mirror and think about the emotion.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard, and it's great. And you know what? Getting it wrong is in this context is totally fine because nobody dies. Yay, right? Like the stakes here are zero. We're just practicing and trying. And so we would do it one more time in our exercise, and if we're able to get it, great. Any guesses about what that emotion might have been?
The phone a friend.
Yeah, it is kind of phone a friend. Help. Any guesses? Happy? Eager? That's funny. Anxious. Anxious. Right. Not anxious. It was
Hope.
hope. Feeling hopeful. Right. And so this is difficult, right? Which is why we do it a lot. And what was your attempt at a different strategy?
Adding different language, an explicit expression of happiness to see a colleague, with maybe an eye towards what comes next.
Great. So thinking about a future space and place and time, and how that, and you decided to change that with your words as well. Fantastic. And so this is a drill. So what happens next is that you guys are like, okay, great. You go to the end of that line. You go to the end of that line. Next people step up, and we do it all over again. Give me a different emotion. We'll try. Well, what did you observe? What did you see? What did you change? Oh, his posture. Oh, his eye contact. The tone of voice. Next, next, next. And people get better at naming the emotions, both at reading them and also portraying them as an exercise done over time. Please give them a huge hand to say thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I learned a version of this exercise very early on, but didn't know it was seeping into my skin and into my being until I had a patient come in to see me one day at clinic. This is now already quite a few years back. And I was kind of rushing from one room to the other, as you do, when my nurse grabbed me and she said, before you go into that room, you need to know she is in a mood today. Like, ooh. Okay. I will call her Mary. That was not her name, but I will call her that. I was like, okay. So I walk into the clinic room, and Mary is buried in the farthest corner of the room. She has scooted that chair farthest away from the door. She's sitting down. She is huddled over, and she's shaking. She's like literally shaking, just trembling. And as I walk in, she starts yelling at me. Quite a mood. She's yelling at me about how bad things are at home, how her son is terminally ill, how they're going to cut off the power because they can't pay the bills. Her grandchild is sick. Her pain is worse. And I am making Mary's pain worse because I am not giving her the medication she needs. And it is all my fault. I did not know what to do. I followed my intuition. And I sat down, not consciously, I have to say. I sat down, I rolled the little stool up towards her, and I instinctively mirrored what she was doing. And I kind of got small, and I didn't start shaking, but I just made myself about her height and size. And I simply said to her, Mary, you're scared. And she started to cry. She broke. She started crying, and she said, yes, I'm scared. All I really needed was someone to listen. Oh, that moment is just burned into my memory. I kind of recover. We were able to get through the visit and take care of what needed to be, or what could be taken care of. But that has stuck with me since then. That was a gift she gave to me, that something as simple as being able to mirror and perceive and reflect was all that she needed to know that she was being heard. And that brings us from the skill group of awareness and attention into the next skill group, which is that of affirmation. This is an actual skill, one of the entire skill groups, I believe, that exist here for medical improvisation. And I believe it is a skill that we actually don't do. And we know its absence because we know that patients will complain about not feeling heard. The doctor wasn't listening, or the clinician, whoever, somebody wasn't listening to me. We also know that in our own personal lives, when we don't feel heard. When we're talking to people, we say something important to someone, and they're talking about, oh, well, when my dog died, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, that's not okay. You see this on Facebook a lot, if anyone Facebook's out there, where someone will post like, I got a new job. And instead of saying, congratulations, that's wonderful, people are like, me too. Or like, if you got a new job, you should really sign up for the blah, blah, blah. Instead of simply reflecting back, you got a new job, congratulations. Right? We see this in other people, and now that I'm aware of it, I can catch it in myself. But affirmation and validation is an art, and it's a skill that we need to practice and hone. Now, we just talked about it in kind of an emotional reflection, but I'd like to talk about it right now in a verbal way. And another powerful lesson I learned when walking in that improv door was the concept of yes. And you're like, oh, everybody says yes. But deeper than that, of what yes really means. And again, in order to really understand that, we're going to do a little exercise rather than me just explaining it to you. And the way we're going to do it is this. We're going to have a set of 30-second conversations here with each other. In order to do that, we're going to break into pairs, and maybe a trio if need be. And the way we're going to do it is this. It's going to happen using all your newly honed awareness skills. It's going to happen in complete silence. You're going to use all your nonverbal communication abilities. And I'd like to start with everyone, please raise one hand. And this is how we know that you have not found a partner yet, okay? By the end of our 5 seconds, oh, everyone's like, put their hands down, all right. By the end of our 5 seconds, everyone will have someone either in a 2 or 3 to speak to, okay? And please, again, have that one hand up, because that's how we know you haven't found someone yet. By the time I count down from 5, please have identified someone you're going to speak with, but totally quietly. Ready? Here we go. 5, 4, find someone. 3, 2. If you see someone with their hand up, include them in your as a trio. 1.5, 1, 0. Okay. There we go. Everyone's got someone. This is what we're going to do. We're going to have a conversation that goes like this. Here are my finger people. I like them. One person's going to start with a statement. And this statement is going to be, we're going to just do a topic. We'll say it's going to be about food. Why not? And this person will say, I like eggs. And the next person will also respond with a statement. We're not going to use questions just for the purposes of this exercise, just statements. I like eggs. This person will respond with a phrase that starts with yes, but. I like eggs. Yes, but there's a lot of cholesterol in them. This person will respond also with yes, but. Yes, but some kinds of cholesterol are good for you. Yes, but not if you're fat. Yes, but that is a terribly judgmental term and you shouldn't use it. Yes, but you are politically correct. Right? So you get the life of my mind. So you get the structure. One person, doesn't matter who, starts with this generic statement about food, and the other person says yes, but, and then yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. Make sense? Easy. You can't do it wrong. Sound good? All right. Go for it. Go for it. 30 seconds. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please thank each other. right. So, thank you very much for having that conversation with each other. Does anyone want to just call out, and how did that feel for anyone?
That was
Fine.
Yeah.
I heard that was fine. Great. Anyone else think it was fine or even fun? Yeah, it's kind of fun. I agree. I always kind of find it fun too. Interesting. Did anyone find it not fun? I heard the word defensive. Yes, sir. It was like a bad dinner party. Thank you, sir. Like a Monty Python argument, indeed. Any other reactions or experiences? Like a competition. Yeah, a little bit of one-upsmanship. It's like, but. And it is kind of fun. I'm horrifyingly good at it. And the reason that I say horrifyingly is because of this. So we said yes. We also said but. The yes didn't need to happen, right? The yes was a throwaway. It was all about the but, right? So consider, if you will, we're going to do that same exercise but with a different start phrase. This time somebody will start with a statement, but every time they respond will now begin with the phrase yes and. Okay? Yes and. I like eggs. Yes, and I like runny yolks. Yes, and especially over hash browns. Oh, here we go. Yes, and when the hash browns are crispy. Ooh, now I'm hungry. Yes, and. So, yes, and, not yes, but. She was like, me too. Okay, so not yes, but, yes, and. Same partner, same statement, different statement, doesn't matter. Let's change the statement, actually. Let's make it about hobbies, any kind of hobby. I like knitting. Horses are cool to ride. Whatever. And then yes and, yes and, yes and. Make sense? 30 seconds? Please go. Thank you very much. Please give your partners a clap. Thank you. Thank you for having those conversations. From anyone in the audience, how did that feel? What was that conversation like? Oh, I heard better. What was better about it?
It was more fun.
More interesting, more fun. Right? Anybody else?
energy goes up.
Energy goes up, and you're nodding in agreement. Yes.
You can keep the conversation going longer with yes and.
Ah, thank you. You can keep the conversation going longer with yes and. Yes, ma'am. Listening better to each other. Interesting. And how so? Hearing what they're saying, yes, and hearing what they're saying, yes. That you are listening harder because you know you have to build on it. Very often in a yes-but conversation, you are pre-planning what your rebuttal is going to be of their statement. Yes, any other thoughts on there? Yes, sir. There is a tendency, yes. There's a tendency for yes and to be more positive than yes but. Yeah, and then yes.
It was more optimistic, but it would be really easy to wander off into.
Yes. Yes, it would be very easy to wander off. It has the tendency to grow and to build. So this is not an either-or situation. This is about equipping yourself with a range of tools. Now, I said before that I really enjoy yes-butting. It turns out there's kind of a spectrum, right? And some people find it that it's much easier to yes-but, and other people find it's much easier or instinctive to yes-and. Well, the truth of the matter is we need to be able to do both appropriately and when needed. So one of the shocking things for me that I learned in improv was that I am yes-butting all the time. In fact, sometimes not just yes, but just frankly, no. No, I can't do that. No, I shouldn't. No, I can't. No, really, I was living in a world of no. And the concept of being able to say yes and meaning it and building on it was really difficult. It was something that I had to practice and train and learn. Now, there's some of you here who are intuitively that. Perhaps you might find that on occasion it's useful to say a but or to redirect or to block. But I would venture to guess that the majority of people with more ease and proficiency in the yes but, it might benefit us to expand our and. And I will move this on, because I see we have time, that one important distinction about this quality of yes is that it doesn't necessarily mean to agree. And this is an important nuance. But the yes of improv is to affirm, not necessarily to agree. And in conversations where something difficult has come up, or there's a contention, a disagreement, I don't need to rob the other person of their stance or opinion. What I'm here to do is to collaborate and build rapport so that we can reach a shared decision. It may not necessarily be the one I want, but we can do it together. And so I can say something like, yes, you do not want to get vaccines for your children today, and I appreciate that you want to do what's best for your kids. Okay? And from there, now they're listening, and now we can go on to share information. I appreciate that you would like more OxyContin. And I want to make sure that I am doing the best job I can as a physician to keep you safe. So, yes, and it doesn't have to be literal. Sometimes it can be an essence. And one of the most powerful phrases that I can use as a clinician that embodies this concept of affirmation as well as contribution, which is the final skill group of adding something, is I appreciate you said that because, which is really building upon the yes and. The skill groups are awareness, affirmation, and finally contribution. In order to add something to a conversation or interaction, we have to have cognitive resources as part of ourselves and build up such that we don't draw a blank, but we have many ideas, which you already have. As children, we already have always had them, but we have drummed them out of ourselves by saying no to ourselves quite a bit. And the discipline of improv is to reconnect ourselves with our creativity and our instincts and our ideas so that we can use them at the appropriate minutes, so that when we say, I appreciate you said that, because we know why we appreciate that and can move it forward. What you just did is the beginning of Improv 101, and you would build from there into scenes. Maybe you are a plumber, you're a plumber and a priest, and you're going to do a scene. And somehow, using just these principles and these skills, you're able to create something out of nothing. Medical improv, we talked about the skills, we talked about the exercises, and we talked about the principles. They all have to do with collaborative communication. And the areas of relevance in medicine are manifold because we spend all our time communicating with other people. And so what we've just talked about are the fundamental interactive skills that build up so many different kinds of interaction, whether it's teamwork, interdisciplinary, interprofessional collaboration, difficult conversations, general things like empathy or resilience. It applies pretty much everywhere. Now, where do we fit that in into actual education? We have grand rounds, something like we're doing today. It's also well suited, I think, best taught in courses like the one we are in our 2 hours a week for 8 to 10 weeks, but also well suited to workshops and retreats at all levels, whether it's medical students, residents, continuing medical education. And it really, because we're all humans, it crosses all disciplines. Now, there's challenges. This is a new field, and the literature is small. And so we are still contributing to it and dispelling some of the misconceptions about it as well. It takes a time investment and, of course, a financial investment as well to dedicate that time and to pull your learners away so they can be with each other. And it takes experience. It's deceptively simple. Sometimes people will be like, oh, I learned this great improv exercise. Now I'm going to go home and do it. Oh, that didn't work so well. Why? Because it's actually, you got to learn it over time, and there's some subtleties to it as well, which is why experiences like the trainer workshop are wonderful to be able to immerse. Now, I took the trainer workshop before I was able to teach improv to others, so it's a long learning curve and a very fun one as well. So there are more resources. This is a website where I've tried to encapsulate a lot of the different ideas we've talked about today on improvdoc.org, and there's a link to the trainer workshop as well. If this is something that you're interested in. And these are the key take-home points today. That medical improvisation we all see is the adaptation of improv theater as a discipline to the medical environment. It's not random. It's a cultivated intuition that you can learn and practice and improve upon that can guide your spontaneity. It's learned through experiential learning, exercises guided by values and principles. It teaches skills of awareness. It teaches skills of affirmation and of contribution. It promotes collaboration, and it promotes self-care. And I want to bring us back to this and end with this. So I would not be standing here today talking to you if it was not for improv. Now, I mentioned that it made me a better doctor, and it did by giving me better skills of communication, so I can see my patients more fully. I can be more present for them. It's made me a better teacher because it gave me a discipline, a pedagogy with which to teach other people that skill. And it's made me a better person because of the values and the skills that it has instilled in me, both in my work and in my personal life. I was very, very afraid for a good chunk of my life. Very afraid to be wrong in every circumstance, such that although it may have never appeared to that on the outside, and I'm well aware that people will be like, you looked fine. I'm like, I know. I worked hard to look fine, but I was not. I was so afraid of being found out, of being a fraud, the imposter syndrome, if you will, that if you had asked me years back what my favorite color is, I would have hesitated to say, because I would have felt like that's the wrong answer. It's pink. Right? But then I was like, oh, I don't know, pink's so girly. Maybe I shouldn't say it's pink. Like, maybe I should pick a better color because everybody's picking pink. Right? I mean, that's ridiculous, but that's what was going on in my head. Afraid to speak up in rounds. I'm the student or the resident in the back who's like, subjective, objective. I have no plan. You tell me what the plan is. Please don't even see me. I would rather not be here at all. Never speaking up, sitting in the back, just wishing to disappear. Even when I started doing improv, I literally would have to get shoved onto stage by my classmates because I was too afraid to say something wrong. I finished residency. I had a job and a dog and a house and a car, and everything looked great, but I was very scared. It was through improv that I learned how to say yes and to trust my instincts and to believe in something and to follow through, to take a class, to call a professor on the other side of the country to ask her about an article, to change jobs because I believed in this work so much that I would leave my great job in order to spend more time doing it. I owe that to improv as a way of learning how to say yes, not only to others, because maybe I was too good at saying yes to other people, but not good enough at saying yes to myself and trusting my own instincts and creativity. And the second thing that transformed my life so much about improv and built up my sense of well-being and resilience was the failure bow. So everything looked great on the outside, but inside, it's kind of a mess. And then about 6-7 years ago, I was diagnosed with vulvar neoplasia, an aggressive kind. Aggressive enough that the last time I went to see my oncologist, he went to do the physical exam, and he was down. It's a miracle. So next time you get a pap smear, may someone say, it's a miracle. I laughed because he never expected it to go away, because that's how bad it was. But when I was diagnosed with that, I crumbled. I felt as though I was a failure. It wasn't that I had made a failure, it's that I was fundamentally and deeply flawed. That despite all the appearance of being successful, this young, single, recent breakup with this guy was much younger, and the job wasn't really going well, and my dog had just gotten cancer, that's true. Things were not going well, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I felt I was not perfect the way I was trying to appear to be, and I did not allow myself to ask for help because I was trying so hard to be right. And it wasn't until I got to my darkest moments where I relied on the instinct that I had learned through improv, which is simply to take a bow, to say, I am not perfect. I am not a mistake. I am just flawed. And by taking that bow, which was as simple as calling a friend, couldn't get out of bed, just couldn't face the day, people were there to clap and to show up. It was something I learned through improv, to accept myself for who I am and to accept others for who they are as well. That we are all flawed. There is no such thing as perfection. We are to say yes to ourselves because we are there to catch each other. And I can do that and stand here before you today because I learned it through improv, through repetition, and being there for each other. So improv, now I do the failure bow a lot, both dramatically as well as the professional version of it, because you don't walk into the NICU and be like, oh, I forgot to turn the vent on, or something that's not appropriate. Don't do that. But I've learned to take feedback better and accept it for myself. We say, take the note. So I remember my boss giving me feedback and me wanting to be defensive and explain and justify, but simply throwing my shoulders back and underneath the desk, unfolding my hands and saying, thank you for the feedback, and leaving it at that. And that attitude has carried me so far and healed me so much in a way that I want to share that with all of you. So improvisation is a skill, it is a discipline, it is something that we can all learn, and it's something that I believe that by building resilience and forgiveness within ourselves, we can share that more readily with others, our patients, our families, our peers, so that in times of unpredictability, which all of life is, we can regard everyone and ourselves with spontaneity that is full of compassion and grace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fu. It is now almost 9 o'clock, and just as a reminder, we have an additional 30 minutes for those of you who can stay for Q&A. So we have some microphone runners, so if you would just mind waiting to get the microphone, happy to have some discussion. So thank you, Dr. Fu.
I was wondering if you'd ever been part of an improv group that was full of medical people, and if you had advice. And I also wanted to let people know that there are 3 of us who have a coach and are getting ready to form a little, we're going to be the improviders. The improviders.
Oh, God,
Yeah, we're shamelessly sucking up for meeting space.
That's funny, I like that.
So if anybody wants to join, we need about 3 more people to kind of get a
Good
little,
for you. That's
otherwise
wonderful.
the circle's so small. So.
And so your
But-
question was whether or not I've been in
Whether or not you've been in a group of, I've been in a lot of improv communities, but there are a lot of things I can't say because they're medical things I just would not make any sense. Would be a very difficult offer to a layperson.
Yeah.
So have you ever been in one that had enough medical people that you could sort of expand?
So that's interesting. So it turns out that in my clinic, there's only 4 of us, and we have a very small clinic, and one of my partners in my clinic is also an improviser at my same ensemble, my theater, and so we're constantly like improv at work and at the theater, so that's really fun. When we get to do scenes together, then we can really go for it. So one of the notes that I've never been in an all-provider group except in the context of the trainer workshops that I do and some of the workshops around the country. But one thing that I was taught in improv performance is to, here's a principle of value, play to the top of your intelligence, which is a quote that's given us, which is to not to dumb down what you know for your audience, and also not to intimidate or show off to people. But it's totally appropriate. We have a lawyer in our improv company as well, very smart people in our group. And it's really exciting as an audience member to hear someone who's a lawyer actually using legal terminology, knowing that it doesn't matter if everybody else gets it wrong. If she's like, oh, well, whatever amendment, blah, blah, and I'm like, yes, but habeas corpus says that, blah, blah. That's hilarious for the audience. And it's, as a physician, I can go on stage and performance and say, try to act out a C-section. It's been a few years. Doing that, and it's very satisfying to the audience to watch someone doing something precisely, and it doesn't matter if my scene partner's like, grab the psoas muscle, when you're like, oh God, I hope you're not grabbing the psoas muscle, with your retractors or something like that. But if I can yes and what they're saying and not get hung up on what's right, then it's actually really satisfying. So you learn that it doesn't matter whether everyone has that same training or not. everyone comes as they are. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for such a wonderful talk. I think what you have said is beautiful, wonderful, and it has a lot of kind of connection and overlap with counseling skills.
Yes,
So has there been any work to kind of look into the overlap, connection, that kind of thing, or article research?
Yes. Yeah, the question was, there seemed to be, there's a lot of overlap with the improvisation philosophy as well as with counseling skills, and wondering whether or not there has been any research into that or anyone looking into that. I absolutely agree with you. The values and the concepts of improvisation are not unique necessarily to improvisation at its core, but the method and the approach to it is uniquely improv. But there are many disciplines and philosophies that approach the same concepts from a different angle, which is wonderful. I love that. And yes, there is a place where people who are trained in counseling, whether it's psychology, social work, and other related fields, are looking at how to integrate these methods, both the teaching methods and the clinical practice methods, into education and practice. So looking at how the exercises might be adapt for counselors in training. There are people who are looking at how to use improv techniques directly with patients. And I make a slight distinction between medical improv, which is using it more in the educational context and training context. So we are each learning how to use improv ourselves, which is different from, in my mind, from therapeutic improv, which is I'm using improv as a therapy method for my patients. There's a subtle difference. Surely there's overlap, but it's different because there's work looking at using it for counseling. There's also work for using it for people specifically with anxiety, for people with autism, and some other people with dementia as well. And so it's a gradation between using it as clinician-based skills to kind of direct therapy skills. So it's a new area. So there's inquiry is just starting. Great question. So many questions. Yes, I will let you decide.
I wondered if you could comment a bit more on, thank you very much for a fascinating, beautiful presentation, but how do you put together the response to the need for reducing stress? We hear so much talk and need to reduce stress in our workplace and clinical environment, and we're trying to work and help people become self-resilient or resilient. And it's just a contrast to say, well, we're living in an environment that demands perfection, and yet we can't and don't want to say we're failures, but we say we're flawed.
Yes.
So could you say a little bit more about how that thinking can help us maybe think about ourselves in a different way that enables us to have that buoyancy that you exhibit, of course, but also it keeps the energy alive?
That's such an important and deep and wide question as well. How do we foster the sense of resilience? And if I understood the question well enough, not just as an individual sense of resilience, but also as a culture, because it is one that we operate in this kind of large medical culture, one that does emphasize perfection, very much so. And I guess to answer that, improvisation is one that only exists and only succeeds because of its intrinsic resilience. If those principles that I had up on the screen before, if one does not follow those principles, in fact, improvisation does not work. Scenes actually cannot move forward, and groups can't interact with each other if the group is not collectively following that. And so, because these principles are so explicit, and that it's a value-based education system, that from the ground up perpetuates a culture of mutual support and resilience, and I think sometimes there's often lip service paid to we're a supportive community, but this is one that translates that value into action in the smallest of ways and repetitively through meeting on a regular basis or so doing these exercises over and over again. And so it becomes muscle memory or cognitive memory that if you spend 2 hours a week supporting everybody around you and being brave on a small moment-to-moment level, that becomes a habit and a good habit, such that when you walk out the door into the rest of the world, when something unexpected happens or something bad happens or you make a mistake, you have just spent 2 hours practicing how to rebound and how to keep going and how not to sit down or pummel yourself or others. And so your instinct has been habitually trained into being one that is more resilient. The other aspect that fosters resilience is that it is just fun. It is fun to do improv. It is fun and it is funny and it's full of laughter. And it's not about trying to be funny, but when you have honest spontaneity and people bring themselves, people are funny. Sometimes the funniest people I've ever had in my class have been the people who are most scared to be there, the people who are convinced they have the least to offer. I'm thinking about one student in particular who English wasn't even her first language, although she'd been living in the States since she was an adolescent. And she was just the most sincere, honest, and hilarious person in the room. And I'm still convincing her that that's true. Everyone could see that. But it's so fun to laugh together and to interact with each other on a personal and honest basis and to embrace the creativity that people have that rarely get a chance to express. And so that act of bonding is incredibly, incredibly conducive. Improv groups will bond together very quickly simply because there's a vulnerability engaged in speaking your truth to each other in a safe place. So those are just two of the thoughts I have. Does that answer some of the question? What one?
I have a comment.
Yes.
From the person who talked about the counseling skills,
Yes,
you
yeah.
had it on one of your slides. It's very similar what you talked about to motivational interviewing.
It is very similar to motivational
use of
interviewing. Yes.
affirmation and then reflections.
Yes.
Where you reflect
Absolutely.
back. And my second question: do you see a gender difference in the application of these improv skills in medical practice?
I will reflect that question back to you and actually say, is there a gender difference that you are thinking of or expecting to see or that you have in mind?
I'm going to be brave, like you said.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm expecting to see a difference.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. As soon as you're
Like female medical practitioners, of all kinds, providers. Again, maybe this is a stereotype, but I'm just thinking, and I've read some I was looking at some research where female family practice doctors have much better health outcomes for their patients. I'm just wondering if it is maybe partly these, what I call, some people call soft skills, listening, observing, affirming, empathizing. So I could be way wrong, but I'm throwing it out there.
I thank you for asking that question. I have also seen or heard referred to that literature that showed that female, I didn't realize it was family physicians, had better outcomes. It's interesting you asked that. So I would not be able to say that I've seen gender stereotypes actually in this. I find that there's something about the nature of this work that when you're in an improv classroom and everybody is doing the same exercise, everyone's pretty equally vulnerable and kind of equally stripped down. People will bring into it their own issues, and behaviors and such and habits. But I have seen folks of all genders, if you will, and all backgrounds behave in a wide range of ways. What's really beautiful about this type of training work is that it's very, it's individualized. Right? This is an investment, but typically one facilitator with, 8 to 14, 16 people. I mean, if you're doing exercises like the ones Nick and Kevin were demonstrating, or scenes where it's just two people, or these drills, like everybody's looking at you, right? And so it's very obvious when you're the one who shuts down the exercise because you're trying to make a gag or trying to be funny, where you're not supporting other people, or you're saying yes but to everything. And instead of it being just this collective awkward moment, it's built into the structure of improv that is the teaching opportunity for everyone to identify that, hey, Jeff, so just now you made a choice. She had said that there was an airplane landing on the roof, and you said, no, we couldn't do that. Like, this is a straw hut. You're like, okay, so now as an audience we're confused. Does that mean there is no airplane outside, even though Jasmine just said there is one? Let's try that again. How can we make it so that there's an airplane and straw hut? Oh wow, there's an airplane landing roof. This is the strongest straw hut ever, right? So it doesn't have to be exclusive. So now that may have been Jeff who shut it down, but it could have easily been Jennifer or Jasmine. Like everybody has their habits that they'll bring into the room, and I have not actually seen a gender difference as to who's more reticent, who's more likely to shut down, who's more likely to hang back. Everyone's got their thing. Everybody's got their thing, and this learning environment calls it out in a way that's safe and supportive. So it's not to say like, you're a terrible person, Jeff, because you just shut down Rebecca. It's like, okay, you made a choice. Let's try it a different way and see what happens, and we can all see what the outcome is, and then review that over and over. Yes.
I just reminded of the very first Alan Boyden lecture. The guest speaker was Martin Adson, a very famous surgeon from the Mayo Clinic. And I never will forget what he said that day. He said, "We are taught never to sit on a patient's bed." He said, "That's not professional, it's not becoming." He said, "Sometimes that's the best damn thing you can do." He says, what you don't want to do is be standing there having them lick up your nostrils the whole conversation. It gives them a sense that you've got time. He said, you may not spend any more time in that room, but it will seem like it. And I thought, this is all what you're talking about, is how to portray yourself and how to work with the patient. And that's how Alan did things. And I think he would have liked this.
Thank you very much. That's really an honor.
Oh, I don't need that, thank you.
Okay.
I come from teaching in the university.
Oh.
Would you please tell us about the name of your clinic? I've been sitting here trying to
The name
think.
of my clinic.
What?
What Mayutica means. Oh, I have become really fruity over the years, to preface this. So I know that not everything happens for a reason, but I kind of like it when it seems like things happen for a reason, just because it makes for a good story. But when I went through the process of deciding that I was going to spend a chunk of my life dedicated to this work, I mentioned I had to change my jobs because I was a full-time residency faculty, and that was all about seeing patients, precepting the residents in clinic, being on service, taking call. The way my job was structured is I didn't have much time for research and doing extra pedagogic study. So I was doing all this work on my own time, and that became mutually exclusive with health at some point, to work all day and then come home and keep working. And so I became convicted that I needed to take time off. Not time off, really. I just went straight to another job, but to cut my FTE down so that I could devote my energies to this work. And I got very good advice that I needed to formalize that as an entity, as a corporate entity, in order to make that distinct for all sorts of unexciting reasons. And so when I did that, I had to come up with a name. So that I was stymied. Do I call it something improv? Do I call it not something improv? What do I do with this? BelindaFood.co. I don't know. It was very confusing. I'm a regular subscriber to Merriam-Webster Word of the Day email, which is just a life. I like words. And so every day it sends you a different word. This morning's word was nuts. Crazy. I was like, cool, that's a great word of the day. I don't know why. Sometimes they're always trying to make a it's funny, if you follow them over time, it's like a running political commentary, but it's very subtle. They just use words. So I'll need to look at the news to see what that was a comment on. But the day I was going to submit my forms, you have to declare what your name is. And the word of that day was a word called Mayutic. And I'd never heard it before. It's spelled Maieutic, I believe. Greek, I want to say, and I was like, ooh, what does that mean? And what it means is Mayutic is the process of drawing knowledge out from another, of evoking knowledge from within. And I was like, that is so beautiful. The process of evoking knowledge from someone who already possesses it, but it's the drawing out. And it alludes to the Socratic method. And so I thought, oh, that is just the essence of exactly what I'm looking for. Because in this work, I do believe that everyone has the creativity and the knowledge and the skills inherent inside them that we have just somehow like squashed and beaten and drummed it out. And that all the work that I do is, it is improvisation based, but in a more broad philosophy. It's about giving people freedom to shine and to express themselves and to be the best full version of themselves that they can be. And so that's why I decided to adopt that name and make it a little easier to spell, but not entirely. People still don't know how to pronounce it, but that's where the word Mayutic came from. So the word Mayutic, yeah.
I want to kind of, sure. I want to for a second go back to the beginning and talk about the move of translating the skills of improv into the medical context.
Yes.
And when I think of a difference between maybe improv theater or maybe just say when I focus on the context of medicine or the culture of medicine, if I were to create a word cloud, pretty quick would come the term hierarchical and things about power and differentials. And given that your open forum this afternoon, which is a little bit more of a tight-knit group, so not everyone will be able to join, but I wonder if I could invite you to reflect a little bit on the role of power and the role of differentials and how what you're inviting us to think about with improv as it relates to the work of clinicians.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So the broad question on that is thinking about how does improvisation inform or dovetail with these concepts of hierarchy and status and power. It's very interesting that these concepts of status and power are such a hot button in medical practice. It's like, that's strange, and yet it is. Often when I teach and talk, this is a topic that people want to come back to over and over again. Status and power is taught in the context of improvisation as simply one other element of which to be aware, to perceive, and as well as to modulate. I think that status and power and hierarchy are intrinsic in society, in all human society. And I'm not an anthropologist. It's been a long time since my anthro classes in college, but I know that these things evolved for a purpose in more than a million different ways. And each culture has evolved its own way of organizing itself in order to get things done, in order to operate and to move. And so did you want to get to that right now?
I had a second question to dovetail onto yours.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you. And so when we learn about status in improv, first it's just the awareness that it exists, because I think a lot of the time we just operate in the world, even though status is embedded in all we do, and we're all walking around wearing name tags that say what our rank is and our title is. Sometimes we forget that it's there, but it informs so much of how we behave and how we communicate is by our perceptions and what we've, the stereotypes or assumptions that we've all made, both about ourselves as well as about other people, and it modulates how we act in the world. And so in improv, we teach people to just be aware of that, to introduce these words into their conversation, and then to learn how to modulate that, both in context of a dynamic as well as individual behaviors, so that in the course of a scene, we will learn how to read the status that the other people are playing, and then how to adjust that and change that over time. And a very standard drill that we will learn as improv students is how to shift that status and strategies for shifting that status and seeing how that affects other people. So we'll be doing a scene. Let's say you and I are doing a scene, and we'll be assigned a status to begin with. That you are going to play a high status. You're going to play a police officer, and I'm going to play a shoplifter. Okay? And we're going to play the scene out. But then we'll start tweaking it a little bit and say, yeah, you're a police officer, but you have very low self-esteem. And you are a shoplifter who thinks you're amazing and has all this swagger. Oh, right, because status isn't always just about rank. Right? So now we have to do the scene over again, but how does that change how we speak? How does that change the outcome of the interaction? What did I walk differently? Did I talk differently? What did I see in you that made me respond in that way? So we get to play with all these differences. And then in a medical context, then we'll start translating that out and moving it more towards a medical scenario once we've built the skills up. I don't like to start with medical scenarios because people get lost real quick and like, well, that's not the chemotherapy protocol I would choose. And you're like, that's not great. That's not the point right now. I mean, we're going to focus on it. So, but once the skills have developed, we can move towards that and say, so this is a clinician-patient encounter. This is a patient who occupies a lot of space in the room. This patient was the president of the university, right? And this patient, but what does that mean? Is it the president of the university, so everything, like this person believes themselves to be high status? Or maybe it's the president of the university who's beneficent and kind and just, willing to listen to everything you have to say. So that you have to unpack what your assumptions and your labels are and how that translates into how you affect behavior. And so you get to play with all those things in the context of improv, which becomes role play. So it fills this niche. Usually we tend to say like, be empathetic and listen well, now go practice. Medical improv fills this educational space where like, these are the skills we want you to demonstrate. Here are some drills and exercises to practice those skills. Now let's apply them to that context of a role play or a standardized patient. So that's how we would take status and then apply it. Is that helpful for that? Okay. Yeah, thanks. I think there's a question back here. Okay, cool, great.
About this presentation is how scripting has been something we've been trying to improve patient satisfaction and things like that, and it has failed. And this is why, I think.
It is. It's because it's impossible to script life. Right? We can't. It is good to think ahead of time about possibilities of what you might say, but be ready to let that go at any given moment. If you're like, no, I have to say what's on the script here. The next letter in my mnemonic is E, right? Like, and it doesn't work. You have to be able to let that go. But if you've only practiced scripts instead of building block skills, you won't be able to actually react in the moment. And even focusing on behaviors, because there's been a lot of studies where they're trying to granulate specific behaviors, like speaking with a certain tone, or whether, even, thank you for the example about sitting on the bedside, which I am a huge fan of, where people say, okay, always sit on the bedside. But no, don't always sit on the bedside. You have to read the situation, and it is very appropriate to be able to, so I don't like never sit on the bedside either, but if you have a patient who's combative, and who really wants their personal space, to be sacrosanct, and you try and sit on the bed, you have just escalated the situation instead of reading the room and the patient and adjusting to it. So you have to have all these tools in your tool belt and the ability to deploy them appropriately. Scripts don't work. They don't. No. I agree. Yes.
Oh, hi, thank you. I did emergency medicine for a long, long time, decades in Los Angeles, in a very busy, crazy place. And I suspect most people here in their practices have relationships with their patients and with the patients' families. And in reflecting on your words, that's not the way most emergency rooms work. You walk in, you've never seen that patient, you'll probably never see them again, or you hope you won't. And many of them have been waiting behind closed doors. They have no idea what's going on. They're anxious, irritated, ticked off before you can get in there, or I do. And old school, what you said in the first row there, don't sit on the patient's bed or gurney, or, well, started doing, and I think a number of my colleagues too, is sitting down for a moment and making some eye-level contact, maybe putting a hand on their shoulder appropriately, I hope. And that broke some of the ice, because otherwise you're on the defensive right off the bat. And in thinking about some of your other remarks, I wish many of my colleagues and others, and perhaps they will through your work, will hear some of this and see it, because it will change a lot of behaviors, and I think for the better, both for the providers and for patients and families. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that story. I know what I can relate to what you're describing. It's been a long time since I've been done my rotations in the ER, but I am very familiar with the feeling of walking to a room with a patient you do not know who is very unhappy already. I call it pre-pissed. it's like they're preloaded and ready to go. There's nothing you could do there. They were angry before you got in the room. And I've been astounded, right? Like they're locked and ready to go, and you just happen to be the next target that walked in. I've been astounded at how quickly you can establish rapport and how little it takes, and that is almost all the skills of awareness and of affirmation. It's to simply meet them where they're at, and it takes a split second, and it makes the whole everything after that follows so much easier to connect with. They recognize, I am sorry that you've been waiting for an hour, or you seem upset, and just letting them say, yes, I'm really angry, and just validating where they're at instead of coming in with an agenda, a script, or on guard. I think what improv does is it gives a vocabulary. So many people in their expertise over years of practice have learned this on their own. And you had to work to learn that through trial and error of like, that didn't work, I will do it different next time. And I think many of us do that because we lack the vocabulary and the filter with which to approach these kind of minute tunings in our cognition and behavior. We don't really have a vocabulary for that. And so my hope is that with this improv-based form of education, that people can be empowered to see what is happening. I joke it's like the difference between like an Atari, 8-pixel, or 8-bit technology, to seeing the world in like 1080 HD, right? So you can see every detail of what's going on, and once you see it, you're therefore empowered to make a change and affect it. So I hope.
Once again, Dr. Vu, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you.